Matake Ape. Hey, this is Ben, and yeah, I just wanted to create this video specifically for the Olympia Respects Indigenous Spirituality group. Um, it's basically on just some of the basic language of anti-oppression. I know some links were posted for Leticia's book, who Leticia is a local to Olympia out of St. Martin's, um, really brilliant woman of color, anti-oppression educator. So when I post this video, I'll also in the comments post the link again to her book and also to her email. And that's the deal with anti-oppression work of any type, is it's like you're not going to be able to just get it out of me explaining a little bit of the language to you. It's something that if you're really interested in becoming an ally or learning about how to deconstruct racism or other types of oppression, that you really have to, you know, continue to do that throughout your life, continue to like learn about it and things like that. But for the sake of us being able to understand each other um, in the specific group, I wanted to post some of the real basic language of anti-oppression work that we're using in here, so that it can be accessible to people. And so the basic thing that I wanted to talk about is three of the main terms that can be found in just about every anti-oppression piece of work. Would be agency, targetship, and allyship. And you know, so I think I was going to start with agency and what an agent is. When somebody is referring to someone as an agent, um, being referred to as an agent would basically mean that that person is a perpetrator of a specific type of oppression. So, for example, in say the oppression of racism in America, in the United States of America, it would be anyone who is a white person or specifically perceived as a white person and basically has white privilege in America, like, which, white privilege is very real. It's basically comes out of, the colonization and of America and the people who were here to begin with, indigenous peoples. And you can see it all around you, basically, if you look. And that's basically what an agent in the oppression of racism would be, just mainly a white person. In the oppression of sexism, that would be any male-bodied person. That'd be any male-bodied person. And so basically, an agent can come in a lot of different forms. An agent could actually be like a white supremacist, or more commonly, an agent is just an everyday American that like watches Fox News, that drives a BMW, that has the privilege to send their children wherever they want to in school, or you know um, you see them all the time. They might be cutting you off at the grocery store, or demanding some service or something like that, but they might not actually believe that they are in fact racist, or have any. They might think, well, I have a few black friends, or I don't condone racism. And the deal is that if you have agency in racism, you do have a level of racism. You have a level of racism to look at. And so that is basically what we're talking about when we talk about an agent. We're talking about someone who has agency. Now, say, like, it is possible, like, say, I am Lakota Ogallala, I'm a Native American person, and I do experience racial oppression a lot, and but the thing that is true is that where I do have agency is in sexism. I am an agent, not so much now. I would more consider myself an an ally, but I do have agency in that oppression construct that I have to look at, that I have to like deconstruct, and that sort of thing. So it's not like just because you experience one type of oppression, it doesn't mean that you can't have agency in another type of oppression, and that you can't be actually oppressing someone else. So it's a multi-layered thing. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, and bear with me, I'm a little bit sick here, but the next thing I wanted to talk about is allyship. So, what is an ally? An allyship in the dynamic of racial oppression is basically someone that, say, like someone who is an agent who decides, okay, like I have these racist beliefs, these racist tendencies that have been handed down to me. Society's basically set up to serve me, and what can I do about racism? Like what can I do about it? And you know, in order for someone to have allyship, they basically have to try to take responsibility for their privilege. They have to try to deconstruct their own racism. And how that's done is basically, through meeting with a group of other allies, other white people, and, figuring out what racism is, how they act it out in their life, through like reading literature, through sharing in forums, and how they can be of, of allyship in helping the empowerment of people of color. And that is a pretty rare thing. I think it's a newer kind of thing that's happening in America, and it's very real and very helpful. And that's the deal, is that I think that is the beginning of where allyship starts, is a person taking responsibility for their own privilege. You can't get rid of privilege if you have it. But what you can do is figure out how not to step on people with it, and how to take responsibility for it, how to be confronted directly by someone, and how to really hear someone. And also, like, um, you can use your privilege to benefit others. You can figure out what is an appropriate use if you have a privilege, to use it to benefit other people, other human beings. And I think that's the start of allyship. I think allyship is basically, something that, after that point, I would consider a real ally is someone that shows up when we need them, that like shows up when there's hard things happening in the community. And a real ally to me is somebody that, if they're in a group of, say, white people, and there's some racist connotation being said, then that person puts themselves out there and says, hey, this is not okay with me. And the difference between an ally and someone who has targetship and oppression is that the ally also has privilege, but gets to step out of the oppression whenever they want to. Basically, like, if it gets too hard for them, if it's, say, they just confronted all their friends on all this racist behavior, then they get to step out of it for a week, and then they don't have to really look at racism for a week. And that's true. And racism is a hard thing to deal with. Everybody needs to do a lot of self-care around it. And that brings me to the last description of the last term, which would be targetship. And targetship in racial oppression is basically any person of color, that presents as a person of color, any person that has heritage, as a person of color. And targetship means that you can't step out of the oppression. It means that you have to deal with it on some level, pretty much, every day. It usually, like in my case, it means that my ancestors were colonized by these people, and that a lot of times I have to deal with their mindset, or You know, it might be them asking me questions or trying to touch my hair or, you know, just being ridiculous or like telling me their jokes or the great, you know, old saying that always happens is like my great great grandmother was a Cherokee princess. I mean, I figure there's got to be a lot of Cherokee princesses out there. I mean, that seems really like, you know, stereotypical, but that's actually something that is really said to a lot of us. That's really ridiculous. And so the whole deal with this type of language is, you know, oppression in general, any type of oppression, all different types of oppression are interwoven in some way, but any type of oppression is really hard for the target to deal with. I can remember before I knew about any of this stuff being really mad when someone would exhibit racism on me, almost to the point of like not being able to speak or move or talk or do anything like that, you know. And so, in getting anti-oppression training and things like that, it helps me be able to function when something like this happens, define what's happening, you know, and then help to deconstruct that type of racism. And generally, someone who is an ally is a really, really excellent thing in helping people of color um, deconstruct racism. You know, and that again is an ally who is taking responsibility for their own racism, that is part of a group, works on deconstructing their own racism, and then pretty much knows after a period of time how to approach somebody else. And I think in the case of like deconstructing an agent, like getting an agent to try and think about allyship, that can be a really difficult thing. You know, it can be sometimes a dangerous thing. I think, you know, and I most often people will act out that type of oppression, sometimes on their own friends, and like I know I'm guilty of this kind of thing and like have been confronted about it and have like made up with friends about it, you know, and so that's how I know about it, you know. It's like it is a really hard thing to do, you know, and it's pretty much after a while you start to realize that there's a real pattern. Like people will really get defensive, people will really act out racism on you, you know. And then at some point there's usually, you know, sometimes there's you know, you can find a place where the person is like, wow, maybe I am acting racist, and that's kind of where you can go in and be like, well, have you thought about this, have you thought about that, you know. So again, the three terms, you know, agent, ally, and target, you know. The agent is the basic person who has been socialized to be the oppressor, and allyship is a person who has agency but is interested in being an ally and deconstructing racism, and targetship is the target of the oppression. Whether it's sexism, I guess the main target of like the oppression of sexism would be female-bodied people, and or racism would be a person of color, you know. So anyway, I hope that clears things up a little bit in some of the real basic language that's being used in this group. And if there's any questions, go ahead and post them. I'll try and address them. I'm also going to try and create a video about how communication can break down among people of color because of colonization and topics of racism. But anyway, yeah, I hope that was beneficial. And again, that is just like the tip of the iceberg. So if you really want this to be part of your life, I would urge you to read Letitia's book or go to one of her seminars or find another anti-oppression educator out there. Thanks.